What if one act of kindness, catching a stranger on a marble staircase, changed a father's life forever? This is Ethan and Isabella's story, where love was built piece by piece. If this kind of story touches your heart, let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next one. The sound of heels echoed against marble, quick and sharp, before slipping into something frantic. Ethan Cole had barely stepped into the grand lobby of the downtown Portland Tower when he saw her tumble forward, the glint of polished stairs waiting to punish her fall. Instinct overtook thought. He lunged, arms wrapping around her just in time. Their bodies collided against the wall with a thud that stole his breath but kept hers safe. For a heartbeat, silence held the air. Then the rush of her shaky exhale filled it again. "I've got you," he whispered, steadying her against his chest, his own heart hammering hard enough to make the words tremble. "Are you all right?" She blinked up at him, eyes wide beneath a sleek ponytail that had loosened in the chaos, strands of dark hair brushing her cheeks. A startled laugh broke through, light but uneven, as though she hadn't expected to be caught. "That was fast," she murmured. "Better than watching you crash down 20 steps," Ethan replied, trying for humor, though his voice came out rough. He helped her to her feet, wincing at the scrape burning across his forearm. She noticed immediately. "You're bleeding," she said, her tone half concern, half scolding. "It's nothing," he muttered, brushing it off. But his attention caught the way her ankle wobbled, the way she tested her balance before straightening her blazer with practiced composure. She was ready to move on, to reassemble her armor, as if almost dying on the stairs was merely a minor inconvenience. Before Ethan could say another word, a tall security guard hurried over, his voice urgent. "Miss Rowan, are you all right?" Ethan froze. "Miss Rowan?" The title carried weight, heavy enough to press against his ribs. The woman offered the guard a brief, measured nod, her expression already sliding back into control. "I'm fine," she said, though her gaze flicked once toward Ethan. The guard turned his attention to him. "Sir, you may have just saved the CEO of Rowan Capital." Ethan's stomach dropped. CEO, of course. He looked at her again, really looked. And beneath the polished lines of her suit and the commanding air she'd gathered back around herself, she was still the woman he had just pulled out of thin air, Isabella Rowan. Heat rose in his neck. He shifted on his feet, suddenly aware of his worn jeans, the faded hoodie pulled too tight across his shoulders. And worse, the strap of Lily's diaper bag slung across him like a billboard for the life he lived. His eyes darted toward the front desk where his little girl was peeking out, clutching her stuffed giraffe, watching everything with wide-eyed curiosity. He cleared his throat. "Right. Well, I'm just glad you're okay." For a moment, Isabella Rowan's gaze softened, tracing from the scrape on his arm to the small figure hiding by the desk. Her lips curved almost imperceptibly before she looked away. And Ethan, jobless, exhausted, carrying both the weight of rejection, letters, and the hopes of a little girl, stood in the middle of the gleaming lobby, wondering how on earth he had just caught the most powerful woman in the building. The marble lobby still lingered in Ethan's mind long after he had walked out with Lily's small hand wrapped tight in his. He couldn't shake the image of Isabella Rowan's heels clicking away, the sound sharp, steady, as though she hadn't just been caught midair. Before she left, she had slipped a sleek black card into his palm with the quiet authority of someone used to being obeyed. "Call me," she'd said, her tone calm but certain. Then she was gone, swallowed by the elevator's mirrored doors. At home that night, the card lay on the kitchen table between Ethan and a pile of unopened bills. The embossed silver letters shimmered beneath the dim light. Rowan Capital, Isabella Rowan, CEO. His fingers hovered above it, but he couldn't bring himself to pick it up. Lily sat across from him in her booster seat, dipping carrot sticks into peanut butter, as if it were a gourmet meal. Her curly hair was falling out of its uneven pigtails, and she was humming a song only she seemed to know. She caught him staring. "Daddy?" she asked with a grin. "Was that lady a princess?" Ethan almost laughed, almost told her the truth, but he stopped himself. "Kind of," he said softly, brushing his thumb over the edge of the card, but not the kind in a storybook. The card burned a hole in his pocket all the next day. He carried it while he walked the streets of Portland. handing out resumes at construction sites and warehouses where foremen barely looked up. Each rejection chipped away at his resolve. But the card pressed against his leg like a reminder, like a dare. By evening, Lily was asleep on the couch with her stuffed giraffe tucked beneath her chin, and Ethan sat alone with the quiet hum of the refrigerator filling the room. He turned the card over once more, exhaled a shaky breath, and reached for his phone. One ring, two, then a voice. Smooth, steady, unmistakably hers. Isabella Rowan. He froze, caught off guard. He had expected an assistant, maybe a voicemail, not the woman herself. Hi, it's Ethan. Ethan Cole from yesterday, the staircase. There was a pause, the kind that made him wonder if she even remembered. Then, warm and sure, she answered, I was hoping you'd call. His grip tightened on the phone. I wasn't sure if you meant it, giving me your card. I don't do things I don't mean, Isabella replied. Come by the office tomorrow morning. Ask for me directly. He blinked, glancing toward Lily's sleeping form. I don't know anything about finance. I'm not offering you a finance job, she said simply, her tone carrying a hint of something unreadable. Then what kind of job is it? You'll find out tomorrow. Bring your resume. And if you need to bring your daughter, do that too. The call ended before Ethan could think of another question. He sat in the silence, the glow of the phone screen fading, his heart pounding like he just caught her on those stairs all over again. He looked at Lily, her tiny chest rising and falling in sleep, and felt a flicker of something he hadn't known in months. Possibility. For the first time since losing his job, since struggling to keep them afloat, tomorrow no longer felt like another wall closing in. Tomorrow felt like a door, and Isabella Rowan was the one holding the key. The next morning, Ethan stood outside the glass tower of Rowan Capital, the reflection of Portland's skyline stretching across its surface. His only button-down shirt was pressed as best as he could manage, though the collar still fought against the iron. Lily's small hand clung to his, her dress neat and bright, her stuffed giraffe tucked firmly under her arm like armor. He took a breath, squared his shoulders, and stepped inside. The lobby buzzed with quiet efficiency, heels clicking, voices low, phones pressed to ears. Yet when Isabella Rowan appeared, it was as if the current shifted. She moved toward them with a calm authority, her smile warm but measured. You clean up well, she said, her eyes flicking from Ethan to Lily with surprising softness. You're not so bad yourself, Ethan managed, his nerves easing with her easy tone. Lily squeezed his hand, half hiding behind his leg, but Isabella crouched slightly, meeting her at eye level. And who is this? This, Ethan said gently, is Lily. Lily, Isabella repeated with a smile. I'm glad you came. Lily offered a shy nod, clutching her giraffe tighter. In the elevator, the three of them stood together, the hum of machinery filling the silence. Lily looked between them, small and curious, like she already belonged in the space between their worlds. When the doors opened, Isabella led them into her office, an expanse of glass and polished wood, commanding yet oddly personal with fresh flowers and scattered books. She gestured for Ethan to sit, but her gaze held steady on him. I need someone reliable, she began, her tone professional, yet edged with something more personal. Someone who doesn't flinch under pressure, who understands responsibility, who works hard without cutting corners. I need someone I can trust. Ethan nodded, though uncertainty twisted in his stomach. That sounds important, but I should be honest. I don't know much about finance. I'm not asking you to handle finance, Isabella said, her lips curving. I'm asking you to be my driver and occasionally more than that, running errands, light security, traveling when needed. He blinked. Your driver? Yes, and my assistant when circumstances require. It's a position that pays $80,000 a year with full benefits. She let the number hang in the air, watching his reaction. Ethan's breath caught. $80,000. It was more than he'd ever made, more than he'd ever imagined he could provide Lily on his own. He thought of the bills stacked at home, of the worn soles of his boots, of the way Lily's eyes had lingered on toys he couldn't buy. Isabella's gaze softened. And if Lily ever needs to come along, we'll make it work. I don't want this to take you away from her. I know she's your world. For a long moment, Ethan was silent, his throat tight. He looked at Lily, who had wandered to the edge of Isabella's desk, tracing her fingers over the smooth marble surface with innocent curiosity. She looked so small in that grand room, yet somehow she seemed to fit. He cleared his throat. That's more than generous. Honestly, it's more than I've ever hoped for. Isabella leaned forward slightly. So, is that a yes? Ethan's chest tightened as he nodded. Yeah, that's a yes. And just like that, the weight he'd carried for months seemed to shift, if only slightly. Walking out of Rowan Capital with Lily's hand in his, Ethan felt the air lighter, the city less unforgiving. For the first time in a long while, his little girl's future didn't feel so far out of reach. Life, he realized, was about to change. The first weeks passed like a quiet turning of the seasons, subtle at first, yet impossible to ignore. Ethan found himself slipping into suits instead of flannel, gripping a steering wheel polished smooth by years of service, waiting outside boardrooms that gleamed like cathedrals of glass. What surprised him most was not the work itself, but the woman who occupied the seat behind him. Isabella Rowan was sharp in meetings, her voice steady, her questions cutting through excuses like glass on stone. Yet between destinations on the stretch of highway leading out of Portland or in the pauses before a client dinner, she softened. She asked about his childhood, about the tools he once carried to construction sites, about the books Lily loved at bedtime. Ethan answered cautiously at first, but her laughter drew him out, warm and unforced, as if she wasn't a CEO at all, but a woman who simply wanted to listen. Lily, meanwhile, made Rowan Capital her own. While Ethan parked the car or waited in the lobby, Isabella often invited the little girl upstairs. Soon Lily's crayon drawings began to appear, taped to the edge of Isabella's vast office window. Bright bursts of yellow suns and stick figures smiling under impossible rainbows. At first, Ethan had tried to apologize, embarrassed by the childish clutter in such a pristine space, but Isabella had stopped him with a shake of her head. I like them, she'd said simply. They make this place feel alive. It was those small moments that began to rebuild something in Ethan he thought he'd lost. His confidence, long buried under layoffs and rejection, slowly stirred whenever Isabella looked at him as though he mattered. She noticed details, how he always checked a route twice, how he kept the car spotless, how he remembered the names of everyone from security guards to waitstaff. She teased him when he grew too serious. He teased her back until her laughter filled the car like music. One evening, after a long day of meetings that had stretched from dawn until dusk, Isabella handed him a small black box. Her tone was casual, but her eyes held something more. Open it. Inside lay a sleek watch, silver and understated, the kind of piece that spoke of quiet power. Ethan blinked. I can't take this, he said, the protest automatic. You can, Isabella replied, her voice low but firm. And you will. You're part of my world now, Ethan, whether you like it or not. For a moment, he couldn't speak. No one had ever given him anything like this, not just the object, but the meaning behind it. He looked up to find her closer than he'd realized, her perfume faint but undeniable, her expression softer than he had ever seen. I'm not sure I belong in your world, he whispered. Isabella stepped closer still. Then maybe I need to step into yours. The air shifted between them, charged and fragile. She reached out, brushing her fingers lightly against his sleeve. And before he could second-guess himself, she leaned in. The kiss was gentle, fleeting, more like a question than an answer. Yet it sent heat rushing through him all the same. When she pulled back, her eyes shone with something unspoken. And Ethan, heart unsteady, realized this wasn't just about a job anymore. It was about two lives so different, yet slowly threading themselves together in ways neither of them had planned. The watch still felt unfamiliar on Ethan's wrist, a constant reminder of the shift in his life. When Isabella asked him to join her for an evening dinner with a circle of Portland's most powerful, he had assumed he'd be the driver that night, waiting by the curb in his suit. But when she stepped out of her office in a sleek black gown and said, "You're coming inside with me," he realized nothing about this evening would be simple. At the restaurant, chandeliers glowed like falling stars above polished tables. The room was thick with murmurs of old money and sharper ambition. Ethan hovered at her side, feeling the weight of eyes sizing him up, measuring the cut of his suit, the ease of his stance. But Isabella didn't flinch. She introduced him not as her driver, not even as her assistant, but simply as, "This is Ethan Cole." No title, no explanation, just his name. And somehow that carried more weight than any label could. They dined with bankers, investors, and board members, their laughter polite, their words rehearsed. Yet Isabella moved among them with the precision of a conductor. She never raised her voice, yet when she spoke, the entire table leaned in. Ethan watched her with a mix of admiration and unease. She wore her strength like armor, polished and perfect. But every now and then, when her eyes drifted toward him, he caught a glimpse of something more fragile. Dessert came, then brandy, then another round of applause for someone's deal closing. But Isabella excused herself, her smile steady, her step firm. Ethan waited a beat before following. He found her outside on the balcony overlooking the water, arms braced against the railing. The city's lights glittered against the dark waves, but her phone sat untouched in her hand. "You all right?" he asked quietly. Her shoulders lifted with a slow breath. "I hate these things," she murmured, pretending to enjoy the company of people who'd sell me out for half a percentage point. "You're good at pretending," Ethan said, stepping beside her. "That's the problem," she replied, finally turning her gaze toward him. "I've had to be." He studied her face in the dim light, saw the fatigue just beneath the polish, the weariness she hid from the world. "You don't have to pretend with me," he said softly. Her voice dropped, almost breaking. "That scares me." Silence stretched between them, filled with the sound of water lapping against the pier, the muffled laughter from inside. Then she spoke again, her words steadier this time. "I had a brother, older, reckless, brilliant. He died 5 years ago. Motorcycle accident. After that, I stepped into his role, into the company. People saw me as the name, the heir, not as me. I've been holding everything together ever since." "I'm sorry," Ethan said, his voice low, sincere. She looked at him, really looked. And for once, her expression wasn't unreadable. "I don't tell people that," she whispered. "Not because I'm hiding it, but because no one ever asks." He didn't try to fill the silence, didn't offer cliches. He simply stood beside her, letting the weight of her confession rest where it belonged. Finally, she reached for him, fingertips brushing his lapel. "You don't ask for anything, Ethan. You just show up. Do you know how rare that is?" He swallowed hard, the words catching in his chest. "I don't want you impressed," he said. "I just want you to be okay." Her eyes softened, shimmering in the reflection of the water. And before he could say anything more, she leaned in. The kiss was slower this time. Deeper, not a question, but an answer she'd held back for too long. Her hands curled into his collar as though anchoring herself. And when they parted, her breath lingered against his. Later, when they walked down toward the marina, the night was quiet but charged. She didn't let go of his hand, not even as they reached the edge of the dock. Beneath the stillness of the ski, with the water rocking gently at their feet, Isabella kissed him again. Longer, surer, like a woman finally stepping out from behind her own shadow. And for Ethan, it felt like the world had shifted once more. The morning after the dinner by the marina, Ethan opened his apartment door to find a suit bag neatly hung from the knob. The fabric was tailored, sharp, far beyond anything he had ever worn. Tucked into the pocket was a smaller envelope, his name written in elegant script. Inside, a card listed the address of a private school along with a simple note in Isabella's handwriting. "Enrollment slot open. Thought of Lily. I." Ethan stared at the words for a long time, the paper trembling slightly in his hands. The suit he could understand. She wanted him to fit in beside her. But the school, that cut deeper. It touched the part of him that had lain awake countless nights, wondering if Lily's bright little mind was slipping through the cracks because he couldn't give her more. By the time he stood in Isabella's office that afternoon, the envelope was still tucked in his jacket. She stood by the tall window, sunlight glinting off the skyline behind her, her posture poised yet waiting. "You didn't have to do this," he said, voice rough. "I know," she replied evenly, her gaze steady on him. "That school is expensive, Isabella. And the suit? I'm not a project. I'm not some charity case for you to fix." Her expression softened, but she didn't look away. "You're not a case," she said firmly. "You're a choice from our own." She stepped closer, her voice lower now, more personal. I don't break things, Ethan. I build them. That's who I am, and I want to build something that lasts with you, with Lily. For a moment, he didn't trust himself to speak. The words settled, heavy and unfamiliar in his chest. He glanced toward her desk, toward the stack of files and contracts that represented the world she commanded, then back to her face, the one place where the walls seemed to lower just for him. You're used to control, he said slowly, trying to steady himself. I get that, but I've got a kid to raise. I can't step into something that vanishes the second life gets messy. Her eyes didn't waver. I'm not going anywhere, she whispered. Ethan exhaled, rubbing a hand along his jaw. His life had been nothing but uncertainty for months. But in this moment, he felt something solid forming, a ground he could stand on. Then maybe, he said carefully, we've got a shot. Silence stretched between them, but it wasn't heavy. It was alive, charged with the possibility neither of them dared name outright. She reached out, brushing her fingers against his sleeve, a simple touch, yet full of meaning. He let her, not pulling away. This time when Ethan left Rowan Capital that evening, the suit rested over his arm, the envelope still in his pocket. But something else pressed against him more firmly than fabric or paper. It was her words echoing with quiet conviction. You're not a case, you're a choice. For the first time, Ethan began to believe that maybe, just maybe, he and Lily had finally stepped into a chapter where they weren't surviving alone anymore. They were building something new. And Isabella Rowan had just promised to stand beside them while they did. It was a Saturday evening when Isabella finally invited Ethan and Lily beyond the iron gates of her estate. The driveway curved beneath towering oaks, the house rising in quiet grandeur behind them. To Ethan's surprise, Lily was the first to break the silence. Daddy, it looks like a castle, she whispered, her eyes wide as she pressed her face against the car window. Isabella laughed softly, the sound lighter than her boardroom tone. Then tonight, you're the princess inside. The house was elegant, but not cold. High ceilings, walls washed in warm light, polished floors that seemed to remember every step. Lily darted toward the garden, chasing a dragonfly across the lawn, while Isabella slipped off her shoes and leaned against the porch rail, barefoot, as if reclaiming a version of herself she rarely showed. Ethan joined her, handing her a glass of lemonade, and for a moment they stood like neighbors sharing an ordinary evening. Except nothing about this felt ordinary. When twilight settled, Isabella touched Ethan's arm. I want to show you something. Her voice was quiet, almost uncertain. She led him through the house until they stopped before a door tucked at the end of a long hallway. With a breath, she pushed it open. The room was nothing like the polished perfection of the rest of the estate. It was lined with photographs, black and white portraits, faded Polaroids, candid snapshots taped to the walls in uneven rows. Two teenagers grinning with their arms around each other, a boy with piercing eyes astride a motorcycle, Isabella herself, younger, her head thrown back in laughter Ethan had never seen on her face before. My brother, she said softly. Her tone didn't waver, but her hands tightened slightly against her sides. This is the only room I never let anyone into. Ethan moved slowly, his gaze tracing each image, the life captured within them. He stopped before one of Isabella, leaning against her brother, both of them carefree, unaware of what was coming. He swallowed hard. You were close. He was the only person who didn't see me as a future CEO, she admitted, her voice thinner now. Just me. Silence filled the room, but not the uncomfortable kind. It was full, weighted with memory and grief, yet strangely gentle. Ethan turned to her, his voice low. Why me? Why let me in here? Her eyes met his, steady and searching. Because you'd understand. For a long moment, neither moved. Then Ethan reached for her hand. It was a simple gesture, but it carried more truth than any promise he could speak. She didn't hesitate this time. Her fingers slipped between his, her grip firm. You said you build things, he murmured. I do, she whispered back. He squeezed her hand lightly, grounding her in the present. Then let's build something real, not polished, not for show, something that lasts. Her breath caught, but she didn't pull away. She held his gaze, her eyes bright with something fragile and fierce all at once. Together. Yeah, he said, his voice steady now. Together. When they left the room, Isabella closed the door softly behind her, but the promise they carried out with them was louder than anything the house had ever held. And as Lily ran into Isabella's arms, giggling about fireflies, Ethan realized this wasn't just Isabella sharing her past. It was her offering him a future. The rain was soft that evening, falling in thin shades against the city streets. When Isabella asked Ethan and Lily to meet her at a gallery on the quiet side of Portland, from the outside, it looked unremarkable. A brick building with tall windows glowing amber against the night. But when she unlocked the door and let them in, Ethan understood this was no ordinary gallery. The space was hushed, almost reverent. Sculptures rose like frozen music from polished floors. Canvases stretched across walls, colors blooming in ways that felt alive. Lily's eyes widened as she spun slowly in the center of